There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right, back in the saddle and ready to go. Open up the door. Starts right now. Fling wide, you heavenly gates. Prepare the way to the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind him. He said, behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven. And I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass. Those things which must take place. Those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about. Discussing the issues of the day. Discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good day, everybody. Andy White here. What you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. I want to welcome everybody from all across the fruited plain. So grateful that you're tuning in, and all around the spherical globe as well. Thanks for tuning in to this brand new post-Thanksgiving week edition of Open Up the Doors. And I am streaming live over on my Facebook page. If you like to see this really handsome face behind the microphone here at Faith FM, you can over there and give a gander over there on my YouTube. Not my YouTube, my Facebook stream over at facebook.com/faithfm91.7. At facebook.com/faithfm91.7. If you've never liked the Facebook page there, and I'll open up the doors, please like the page and join in the fellowship. You can also follow me on Truth Social. Just look up my handle, AJ White, over there on Truth Social if you are on that platform. Again, it is increasing. It is networking, meeting a lot of new people, and making good friendships over there. So it's really fun over there at Truth Social. If you're not over there, go on over there and look me up, AJ White. Just AJ White. That's it. We are streaming all over the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. If you are outside of the Faith FM broadcast area, you can download the free Faith FM app for your various platforms, whether it's Android or Apple. Just look up Faith FM in Sag Harbor, and you'll find us. It's a great resource, a great tool to have to listen to great Christian programming from the East End of Long Island. All right, I will be going to the phones in the second hour of today's broadcast, so if you would like to be part of the broadcast, write down the phone number right now. I would love for you to call in, 631-725-2069. If you want to, throw in your 2 cents, add to the conversation, that's 631-725-2069. All right, so those are my preliminaries. Get them out of the way. And now we'll get into the meat and potatoes and all the stuff that I've gotten to get to since Thanksgiving. Nice. It was a nice week off. It was nice having a break. But what I am going to do in this broadcast is I'm going to continue along with the topic of my broadcast from 2 weeks ago, the week before Thanksgiving. And I had titled that broadcast Total Control. And in keeping with that theme, because there's so much going on, but in keeping with that theme, so to speak, this broadcast I'm titling Total Takeover. It's kind of part two, in a way, from the broadcast from 2 weeks ago. Because a total takeover of what the government powers that be want to accomplish. And they are deliberately working on the ways and means to have a complete and total takeover of every facet of our lives. A total takeover of the internet, a total takeover of the information that you are allowed to receive through what is now being called the censorship industrial complex, that they want to to have total control of the information that you are allowed to know and see and hear. And I touched upon that 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to continue with that today as well, because not only that, as a matter of fact, today is the opening day for COP28, a climate control, a climate crisis, a climate change conference over in Dubai. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But they want to have a total takeover of the food and farming industry so that they can have control over what you are allowed to eat. A total takeover of the foods that you can consume, all in the name of climate change. And then, of course, there's the infrastructure, the governmental infrastructures are looking for a total takeover of the economy, ultimately, and a total takeover of the banking system through CBDC, central bank digital currencies. In short, the government zeitgeist of today is aimed at taking total control of all facets of society through a total takeover of all things pertaining to our lives, to your life, to my life. Total takeover of the governments. But you know what, folks? This really isn't anything new. It's really just old-fashioned, fascist, Marxist ideology being given a facelift with a new brand of authoritarian Botox and reimagined with the aid of high tech and AI in order to produce its illusionary Marxist socialist utopia. As the mantra of the father of fascism almost a century ago said, in fact, it really was a century ago, the father of fascism, Benito Mussolini, this was his motto, this was the mantra of the fascists in the 1920s and 1930s in Italy, and the fascism that was growing even in the United States. You know, Mussolini was like a cult hero in the U.S. for a while before World War II broke out. But anyway, their mantra was everything in the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state. That's the English of what he would say in Italian, which I cannot pronounce it in Italian. I don't speak Italian. But this is the mantra. Everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Mussolini's formulation remains one of the most enduring definitions of modern totalitarianism. Italy's fascist regime under Mussolini was the first to declare itself totalitarian, and it envisioned a radical new social order engineered by the state. So my point in bringing this up is that this isn't new. This is what the really the spirit of Antichrist has been formulating for 100 years now. But now they've got the technical wherewithal to really do it. And I'm saying all that to bring it to this, because that Marxist, socialist, utopian philosophy, which is really a fantasy, but it's a fantasy, but they're really pursuing it because they want to make their fantasy a reality. But that philosophy and that goal is alive and well in the UN's Agenda 2030, something we've talked about throughout the years. But they're doubling down on it right now, even as I speak. You see, Agenda 2030 is essentially a totalitarian socialist manifesto that was put out by the UN. The UN has signed strategic agreements with the largest organizations on the planet, corporations, and world powers to fulfill their utopian vision for the world. This is their brave new world order, with unelected statist bureaucrats ultimately in control. That's their agenda. That's their goal. And what it boils down to ultimately is that means that you and I, if they succeed and if they get their way, will be ruled by a UN administrative bureaucracy, a global administrative bureaucracy, a world order based on a command economy, Marxism, communism, but one that is at its core socialist and totalitarian. This is the agenda of the UN's 2030 agenda. And it's all spelled out, and it's all laid out on various websites of the UN and the World Economic Forum. This is the 2030 agenda with all of its various tentacles into every aspect of taking over people's lives in a very real way. And if you think that the American deep state is bad, and it is, the UN deep state and its global bureaucratic state is destined to be and will be far, far worse. Now, one of those tentacles of this hydra, of this octopus, one of the tentacles of Agenda 2030 is what has now been dubbed, as I shared a few weeks ago, the censorship industrial complex. And I want to read something that popped up in the Epic Times just the other day along these on this topic of the industrial censorship complex. The Epic Times reported the other day a powerful United Nations agency has unveiled a plan to regulate social media and online communications while clamping down on what it describes as false information and conspiracy theories. Well, of course, anything that they deem as being false information and conspiracy theories, they want to obliterate it. They want to clamp down on it. We've been experiencing this now because it's all in pursuit of their Agenda 2030. But the Epic Times goes on to say, but this agency is sparking alarm among free speech advocates and top U.S. lawmakers. Well, rightfully so, and I'm glad it is. But the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, dubbed UNESCO, this is the agency they're talking about. And I've talked about UNESCO many times over the past several years because they're basically they are a very powerful UN agency that unfortunately America we are giving them a lot of aid. They're constant. They are anti-Semitic. They are anti-Zionist. They are anti-Israel, and they're constantly every year they come up with another condemnation of Israel. That's an aside, but President Trump, when he was in office, defunded. We stopped giving funds to UNESCO. He was right when he did that. He was correct when he did that. But of course, the Biden administration overturned all of that. Now we're funding UNESCO again. But this organization, getting back on the immediate topic here about the industrial censorship complex, they have in their policies, in their directives, let me quote from them, they want to take concrete measures, that means authoritarian, which must be implemented by all stakeholders, which means governments, regulatory authorities, civil society, and the platforms themselves. They released a 59-page report just this past month. And the approach that they want to impose is the imposition of global policies, as I just read, over everything. They want to take control really over everything when it comes to media, internet. Indeed, the article goes on to say, indeed, many of the policies called for by UNESCO have already been implemented by U.S.-based digital platforms. Let me read that again, because a lot of people say, well, the UN, they've got no sovereignty over us, and they don't. But you know what? The deep state doesn't care about our sovereignty. They're globalists. They don't care about our Constitution. They don't care about your personal and individual freedoms. They don't care. All they care about is your obedience to their power. So let me read that statement again. Indeed, many of the policies called for by UNESCO have already been implemented by U.S.-based digital platforms at the behest of the Biden administration, the latest congressional report has shown. So now, at the same time, because this is hand in glove, my friends. This is hand in glove. This is connecting the dots. At the same time, UNESCO has been unveiling its plans to take over the internet and the internet infrastructures. Our FCC under Biden has just taken over the internet. I talked about that 2 weeks ago. There was going to be a vote amongst the 5-member panel of the FCC whether to implement Biden's policies, and the good side lost 3-2. The FCC is now has now officially taken over the internet as of last week. Biden's plan hands the government, which is the FCC, is well, actually they're not a branch of the government. They're an alphabet thing that's really unconstitutional. But again, like I said, they don't care about the Constitution. Biden's plan hands the government, the FCC, effective control of all internet services and infrastructure in the country. And never before in the 40-year history of the public internet has the FCC, or any federal agency for that matter, claimed this degree of control over it. The internet has been basically a private network. It's really all the internet service providers. They're private. But now the FCC has taken them over, giving them government control over something that we had freely accessed. You can begin to see the problem in this. They have now complete control over the internet. President Biden's plan, it calls for the FCC to apply a far-reaching set of government controls that the agency has not applied to any technology in the modern era. Federal Communications Commissioner Brendan Carr, he was one of the two that voted to not do this. Again, it went into effect with a vote of 3-2. This guy, Brendan Carr, was one of the, no, we're not, this is unconstitutional, we're not going to do this, but he was outvoted. But Brendan Carr is calling the Biden administration's quote-unquote digital equity plan for all internet services and infrastructure an unlawful power grab. It's something I shared 2 weeks ago, but I'm just bringing it up by reminder, because my point here is that this is completely in line with what UNESCO at the same time is putting out with the UN's Agenda 2030. Again, they're walking together in lockstep. If Biden's push, now I want you to listen to this very closely. If Biden's push to have the FCC take control of the internet and for them to be given more power, which has already happened, how much longer will it be before radio stations like this one, Faith FM, will no longer be able to continue to operate because the government doesn't like its content? Oh, we've got separation of church and state. Oh, we've got laws. Folks, listen to me. Once the government takes control of things, they take total control. They take over. It's not a hypothetical anymore. It's a real danger. It's a real issue. How long will it be before we acquiesce our national sovereignty and our Bill of Rights because of global mandates? It's only a matter of time, it seems, because if the FCC decides it needs to abide by the UN dictates, which they apparently already are, as well as prescribed in the EU's Digital Services Act, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago. The EU's Digital Services Act is basically a mirror image of Biden's policies for the FCC. If they push this envelope, and make no doubt about it, my friends, they will push this envelope. But if they get their way, you will be seeing independent conservative news sources like The Blaze, or One America News or the Daily Wire or Faith FM. I mean, I can go down a list, but here's my point. They could pull the plug on us. They could pull the plug on anything that they deem doesn't go along with their agenda. Oh, they're not doing that quite yet, but everything is in place for them to do that. They now control the internet. They now control the industrial censorship complex. This is not a hypothetical. It's very real. This is what the EU wants, the European Union. And thanks to their recently enacted digital service law, again, I shared on this, but by way of reminder, they are already affecting free speech in America. And from all appearances, both American big tech and, worse yet, a now empowered deep state FCC, Federal Communications Commission, for those of you who don't know what FCC stands for, Federal Communications Commission, a government agency, they're all on the same page. The FCC is now on the same page with the digital service law of the European Union. They're on the same page with Agenda 2030 of the UN. Your First Amendment rights, they're laughing at them. Oh, they say no. They don't agree with that. They say, oh, we have a constitution. We've seen where that has gone already in the past. American companies. See, this is what the fascism is about. The marriage between the corporations and the government. That is what fascism is. And we see how American companies are now going to have to submit to the European Union's new censorship law in the Digital Services Act because it's being enforced now. America's big companies, every one of them, Meta, Twitter, which is X, which I'll get to in a moment with something else about X. America's big companies, Facebook, YouTube, are all being forced upon penalty of huge fines by Europe to dictate and infringe upon our First Amendment rights. The world's largest social media platforms, as I said, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Google, will have to crack down even more than they have been on quote unquote, illegal and harmful content, or else face hefty fines under the European Digital Services Act. In fact, the EU's new rules said if that companies don't comply, they will suspend a company from operating in the European Union. Now, remember what I just said a moment ago about the FCC. If they really want to push the envelope, they could shut down The Blaze. They could shut down the Daily Wire. They could shut down One America News. They could shut down conservative, independent Christian broadcasting stations. They could shut down Faith FM because they have the power and the law on their side in shutting them down. If they find there's non-compliance. And as a matter of fact, and I'm going to have to go to a break. I knew this was going to be long. This broadcast is probably going to go into the second hour for sure, because there's a stuff here I got to get to, and I'm already a half hour in. But what riots broke out in Ireland this past week because a Muslim immigrant had stabbed 5 people and 3 children. And I'm going to encapsulate it now, but I'll come back to it in more detail. X, Elon Musk, was the only big tech company that would not comply with the censorship that the European Union and the Irish authorities wanted to put on. I'll get into that when I come back. Whatever you think about Elon Musk, and a lot of people have a lot of questions about him, he believes in free speech. And I kind of like his chutzpah. But I'll get back to that in a moment, because there's a lot of kind of juicy stuff here going on. Because we have to resist this stuff. And it's going to take brave people to fight back. And they're coming after Elon Musk now. They want to shut down X, Twitter. But we'll get back to that in a moment. Right now, I'm going to take a break, catch your breath, and I'm going to play a tune. I just want to mention here, I'm going to play a tune, because I promised the brother I would do it, a local artist here named Dorian Joseph, and he's produced some music, and he asked if I would play some of his new music on the radio show and here at Faith FM. And we want to support local artists. We want to support. He goes to a local church here. I met him a few weeks ago, and so anyway, here's a song by local artist Dorian Joseph called "From the Ashes." So Dorian, if you're listening and you're out there, here you go, bro.
Oh, you help me rise back from the ashes.
Hallelujah. Amen. That was Dorian Joseph with a tune from the ashes. Welcome back. Andy White here on the radio, tearing down strongholds. You are listening to Open Up the Doors, Integrity in Broadcasting, here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. And I'm here penetrating the unseen powers of darkness, sending powers and principalities into frothy fits of frenzy, simply by speaking the light of truth. Anyway, I want to get back to what I was talking about a moment ago with some of the things that were going on with the censorship and the crackdown that's coming out of Europe. It's affecting us here in America as well, as part of their takeover of the internet, takeover of the narrative. But let me back up a little bit here. As I said a moment ago, look what's happening in Ireland this past week after a Muslim stabbed 5 people, 3 of which were children, about a week and a half ago. Riots broke out in Dublin and all across Ireland. You probably saw them on the news because Irish citizens are fed up with the overwhelming influx of migrants and immigrants, the majority of which are Muslim, coming into their country. It's happening in all the countries of the world, including our southern border. You know, these governments are trying to break down borders on purpose, folks. That's a whole nother issue, because if they can break down borders, they can break down, the natural national boundaries of nations. They could institute their Agenda 2030 and their global policies much easier. Having said that, the well-known Irishman and MMA UFC fighter Conor McGregor, who's Irish, I just said that, I believe, but he tweeted out on X his political opinion after the riots broke out. He just put a statement out there on Twitter, because that's what you're allowed to do. But he simply stated his opinion. He said in his tweet that the Irish citizens were fed up with their government policies. But let me stress, he wasn't condoning in any way the riots. He emphatically did not condone the riots. He was explaining why the people were upset. But unlike the political left in America, remember when the political left in America was condoning the riots and even supporting BLM during the riots of 2020 after George Floyd was killed? But now, look at this comparison here. Now that Conor McGregor, as an Irishman, now he's being investigated by Ireland for his comments on the Irish riots and possibly faces hate speech charges. There was no hate speech in the tweet. I read it. But this is the hypocrisy. This is the hypocrisy of tyranny. It's how tyranny and hypocrisy have met and kissed. Because it's funny how this works. The left, remember, the left again was explaining and condoning. Not only were they explaining the frustration of African Americans during the George Floyd riots, they weren't only explaining it, they were condoning the riots. And that was perfectly okay in their eyes. Remember some of the things that Pelosi said, some of the things that Maxine Waters said. I won't relitigate and rehash all that, but we have it all on record. But now that McGregor essentially, I don't even want to say essentially, because he was not condoning the riots. But McGregor was explaining that Irish citizens are upset with their government's policies, again, without condoning the rioting. But now, according to the left, that's not okay. And it's worthy of investigation and possible prosecution. And it's definitely a call for more censorship. And in the spirit of never let a good crisis go to waste, Ireland is passing even more authoritarian censorship laws, and now this is where Elon Musk comes into it. X, because here's the thing, the Irish government colluded with all the big tech companies, Facebook, Meta, YouTube. They colluded together to censor the content after that migrant stabbed those 5 people. And Elon Musk, with his X platform, refused to comply. I give him kudos for that. He refused to comply. So now Ireland and the EU are looking to shut down Twitter. And there's a whole other thing going on with that as well. They a few weeks ago, Elon's been losing a lot of his advertising because Media Matters manipulated the algorithms to make it look like Elon was promoting anti-Semitism. That's a whole nother. It's connected, but it's a whole other issue. He wasn't, and there's a lawsuit against Media Matters right now. Again, Elon Musk, he doesn't take this stuff. He doesn't take this stuff. He was on a I think it was an ABC interview the other day, and when asked about all these companies that are pulling their advertising from him, and he's losing billions of dollars in advertising because of lies put out by Media Matters. Elon turned around and said, I don't care. I won't use the language that he used. I don't use that language, but he basically told him to go pound sand. I'll put it in a nice way. He didn't say go pound sand, but that's how I'll put it. Guy's got chutzpah. He's not going to be pushed around by these globalist, tyrannical bullies. He really isn't, no matter what else you might think about him in other areas. But because he's resisting and he's not complying, Ireland is now pushing and enforcing or legislating now even more draconian anti-hate laws that they're calling about. That would even criminalize, listen to this, criminalize memes that pose free speech concerns. According to one news source, I like the way it was worded here, people don't realize how extreme Ireland's new hate speech bill is. You can get up to 12 months in prison. Let this sink in. You can get up to 12 months in prison for refusing to give passwords to your devices if suspected of committing hate speech. Okay? In America, we have a Fourth Amendment. That wouldn't fly for a second. Of course, unless they totally abrogate the Constitution. But again, this is Ireland. You don't give us your phone so that we could look at everything you've posted. We could see how you what you said to your wife, what you said to your friends. They want to take control of people's cell phones. And if they refuse, listen to this, if they refuse to allow the state the passwords to read messages, even text messages, between you and your spouse, they can put you in jail for up to a year. Now that is totalitarian. That is authoritarian. The Irish politicians have been bought off by the European Union. And they're the biggest of all globalists. They've sold out the Irish politicians, the globalists, the elitists have sold out the sovereignty of the Irish. But folks, make no mistake about it. It's not only happening in Ireland, it's happening in all the nations, including ours. They have signed on to the UN and the World Economic Forum's Agenda 2030 policies, and they are selling out their people. As I said at the top of the broadcast, 1 year ago, there was COP27, and there was a lot of hoopla about that. And I did a broadcast a year ago called "The Harlot Comes to Sinai," because a year ago the COP27 conference was held at the fake Mount Sinai. I'm not going to reiterate all that broadcast, but there was a lot of hoopla that the Pope was going to read the climate control 10 Commandments there. He didn't go last year, And there was the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church did put out the quote unquote 10 Commandments for climate change. That was a year ago. Today, as I speak, COP28 has begun, November 30th. And this year, the Pope is going. Well, he's supposed to go. He is supposed to go, but he's been sick. He's had a respiratory disease respiratory infection the last week or so. So I'm not sure he's going to go, but he was supposed to go. But this year's focus, my friends, this is a convergence of tyranny and hypocrisy, because this year's focus is on meat consumption and farming, another tentacle moving on from the censorship industrial complex. Let's talk about what they're talking about as far as your food and beef production, because this year's climate change COP28 focuses on meat consumption and farming. You know, they want us to eat bugs. They really do. It's not a joke. The COP28 protocol, the United Nations wants to tell first world countries like, well, all industrialized countries, to limit meat consumption in their foods to get to a net zero plan. I love what the U.S. producers of beef said about this. I'm not going to get into all the weeds with this, but in one report, this was in the news source, Just the News. The United Nations is expected to ramp up its calls for the world to greatly reduce meat consumption in order to combat climate change. During the COP28 Climate Change Summit, which starts today in Dubai, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, that's the FAO, separate from the UNESCO, the UN has all these agencies that are part of the tentacles of Agenda 2030. But they will publish in this conference this year, they will publish a global plan calling on nations with high rates of meat consumption, and that would be us, to change their diets in order to lower greenhouse gas emissions. Oh, and here's how they try to soft pedal it. Oh, the document isn't legally binding, but it is expected to have influence over policymakers. That's what matters, folks, because they don't care about what's legally binding or not. They have influence. What their policies are already influencing what's being done by our politicians. And they want to have influence over the policy makers who are setting more and more rules to fight climate change. And what did somebody say here? It's kind of funny. I don't know who said this. Oh, here we go. Some guy named Daniel Turner, who's the founder and executive director for Power for the Future. He made this statement. Daniel Turner said, "It's unclear which will come first, the UN taking away your hamburger or Joe Biden confiscating your gas stove so you can't cook it." Yeah. But the headline, the headline of this news story was, U.S. beef producers say UN's proposal for eating less meat demonizes the industry. Yes, my friends, this is scripture, because this is doctrines of demons, that you're not allowed to eat meat, the forbidding of eating of meats. Now, the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. That's all this is. You think it's just politics? You think it's just the maneuverings and machinations of men and of nations? No. These are the powers and principalities that are enabling this, that are working through their spirits and through their minds, the spirit of their mind, the sons of disobedience. Now, the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies in hypocrisy. This is the COP28, the convergence of lies and hypocrisy and tyranny. Having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from food which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. I'm going to take another short break right here. I'm just going to let things simmer, and I'm going to move along through the rest of today's programming here, because I want to get through this stuff. So hang on to your hats, and I'll be back in a moment. But here's a great tune. I picked this one on purpose by the Newsboys called Escape.
Don't believe the hype!
Fusion of heart, mind, and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM. WEGB 90.7, 93.3 in Napeague, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. All right, folks, thanks for hanging out with me today. Got a lot of stuff on my plate, but let me just do a couple of quick broadcast notes here. The first hour of this broadcast re-airs today at 3 p.m. Thursday, and then again at 1 p.m. on Saturday. If you would like to keep it right here on Faith FM and catch any parts that you missed, or you can also, and I would love for you to do this, please subscribe to my YouTube and my Rumble video platforms. Just look me up, Andy White, Open Up the Doors, at both YouTube and Rumble. Over there on YouTube, hit the little bell and you will be notified when we upload these edited and post-produced versions of the broadcast. If you've, please, if you've never subscribed, subscribe to either or both. I prefer you subscribe. Well, prescribe. I mean, yeah. Please, get the word out. Subscribe to the platforms, both YouTube and Rumble. I also have a group page, an Open Up the Doors group page on my Truth Social platform. Yeah, I know somebody's saying subscribe. I think I was saying prescribe. Thank you, Debbie. My brain was thinking one thing and my lips were saying something else. Subscribe. Anyway, yes. Where was I? Please, if you've never joined my Open Up the Doors group page on Truth Social, and you're over there, it's an extension of this ministry, and it works just like a group page on Facebook. Post as you will, things that are relevant, to the things that we talk about here on Open Up the Doors. All right, I got a few minutes here left in the first hour, and I'm going to continue this into the second hour. But let me say this in the few minutes I've got here for this first block, this first hour. There is a, let me say it this way. Gathering my thoughts here. There are things that are being done that most people simply aren't paying any attention to. It's not that they're being done in secret, but they're actually being done quite out in the open and for all to see. Yet most people living their daily lives and doing the things they need to do on a day-to-day basis aren't paying attention. And then when things suddenly change, they're alarmed. And they think it's all of a sudden, when it really hasn't been so sudden at all. It's just that they weren't paying any attention. Who's paying attention to what the UN does? Who's paying attention to COP28 over there in Dubai? Because this is the spirit of the age. This is the present zeitgeist of which many seem to not be able to truly discern what is happening and are even oblivious to it. And then there are those who do see what's going on, maybe, but they're complacent about it. They're apathetic about it because they don't think it really will have any effect on them. And this indifference is the reason that the preconditioning and the grooming of the masses for total societal compliance continues unabated. Incrementalism has been a socialist Marxist tactic from the very beginning. The social engineering, the nudging of society towards a certain direction, a little bit here, a little bit there, and most people aren't noticing it so much on a day-to-day basis. Yet all the while, the masses are being groomed for compliance. One step at a time, one day at a time, one exploited crisis after another at a time. That proverbial frog sitting in a pot of water, slowly coming to a boil, sitting comfortably in its complacency, never for a moment thinking its indifferent compliance is the slowly churning demise of their life and freedoms. As it is written in Proverbs, the complacency of fools will destroy them. But then one day they wake up and they say, we're not living in the same country I grew up in anymore. We're not even living in the same world. All of a sudden they wake up, but then it's too late. It's too late to push back. It's too late to fight back. Well, short of a revolution or a civil war anyway. All of a sudden everything is different. And people are upset when they wake up to find out that their whole society has been changed. That's why those riots broke out in Ireland. Because while they were busy living life, going to work, taking care of their families, and that's all legitimate stuff, their government was busy at work and getting away with undermining the foundations of their society a little bit at a time, and nobody noticed until it was too late. And again, if they didn't notice, they were apathetic. They were indifferent. And in their complacency, they told themselves that none of this stuff would ever affect them. But then all of a sudden, critical mass is reached, and boom, a full-blown crisis erupts. Chaos ensues, and people say, where did this come from? But there are some who are paying attention. There are some who can see and discern what is really behind the mask of tyranny. God has set watchmen on the walls. And it would behoove us to take heed of the things that they're trying to bring to light and not say, well, none of this affects me. Because, my friends, it does affect you. It affects all of us. And there are things that we can do to push back and fight back. But I'll get into that when I come back in the second hour. Like I said in the first hour of the broadcast, there are so many tentacles and so many facets of the UN's Agenda 2030 that you could spend hours really on each and every little bit of what they're doing or what they're trying to do. But it is the spirit of the age. It is what this present zeitgeist is heading, as I said a moment ago. And one of the things that, we were always talking about that people say, and it's a legitimate question. It's a very legitimate question. People say, you're always talking about the problem. You're always talking about the issue. But what's the solution? You keep discussing the issue. You keep discussing the problem. But many of us already know what the issue is. Many of us already know what the problem is. What is the solution? How do we fight back? How do we stop it? Well, here are going to be my words of wisdom for you. Because with all God's honest truth, we can't stop it. Now, I know that's probably just like people saying, oh my gosh, that's hopelessness. No. We who know the truth are filled with hope. We who know the truth understand that the Bible tells us that all these things must come to pass. We know how the story plays out. That's why I say we can't stop it. Because all that is written must be fulfilled. We know the scripture tells us what it will be like in the last days. It's God's agenda. Forget about Agenda 2030. Forget about what the World Economic Forum's plans are for society. So what? The Bible tells us before they even thought about it themselves what it would be like. It's not Agenda 2030 we've got to be worried about or necessarily concerned about. Now, I do talk about it, obviously, so that we are aware of these things. As I've said so many, many, many times on this broadcast, it's not about fear mongering. It's not about being Chicken Little and saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the sky is falling." No, it's about being aware of where we are in the season and in God's divine blueprint. Because the Bible gives us all the signs of the times, and Jesus said, "When you see these things begin to happen, and let me rephrase that correctly, when you begin to see all these things begin to happen." That little word "all." There's always been earthquakes. There's always been totalitarian governments. There's always been persecution. But when Jesus talks about the end of the age and the end of the times, all these things that were, here, there, and everywhere, here a little, there a little, no, they all converge together. They all, like Jesus said, are birth pangs. A woman in transition, ready to give birth, and all of a sudden, the aches and the cramps she was feeling throughout her pregnancy, all of a sudden converge into one big mass of pain. The best I can explain it as a man. Birth pangs is what Jesus said. So when I say what can we do to stop it? Really, folks, nothing. But we can fight back, and we can resist. We can be the salt of the earth that the Lord has called us to be. We can be the light of the world that God's called us to be, because it's not about Agenda 20, it's about God's agenda. He is overriding Agenda 2030. He is using the maneuverings and machinations of men and of nations to bring forth his prophetic determinations, as I've said 1,000 times in the past 10 years. And the way we fight back is to stand firm in the faith. Preach the gospel. We tell people that this world is passing away and the lusts thereof. But he who does the will of God will endure forever. That's why we focus on these things and talk about these things, so that we can preach the gospel. Because we know what is happening, but more than knowing what is happening, we know why it's happening. And we've got the greatest message in the world. We've got the message of hope. We've got the only answer. So tell them about God's agenda in the midst of the world's agenda, and how these two agendas are in conflict with one another. These two agendas are butting heads with one another, but I got news for them. God's the one who's in control of the agenda. God is the one who's in control of the agenda. The things that man planned for evil, God intends for good, ultimately. Oh yeah, there's going to be persecution. Oh yeah, you might find yourself in the pit, Joseph. You might find yourself in prison for a season, Joseph. But the things that man plans for evil, God's going to use for good. That's where we, as a church in the last days, comes into play. Explaining these things to people. When they fall into the awareness of what's going on and they want to all of a sudden erupt with rioting, we say, no, rioting's not the answer. Don't burn down your city. Don't burn down your neighborhoods. Understand what's going on and step out and believe God and understand that these things were all foretold to happen, and that our hope is not in this world. Our hope is not in this world. That's how we fight back, by standing firm to the end and not complying with the spirit of Antichrist, come what may. And I'll say that again, come what may. We can't stop it. And if we don't comply, there'll be real consequences, to the point of losing our heads one day. Because one day, all of this tyrannical convergence will come together in the kingdom of the beast, with the ultimate totalitarian fascist imbued with the very personification of Satan. And he will demand total compliance. He will demand total obeisance. Do not bend the knee. You'll lose your head, but you'll have eternal life. Better to enter into life maimed than into hell whole. So how do we resist? And we begin resisting. We're not going to resist in the evil day, in the real evil day, if we don't know how to stand firm here when it's still easy going, especially here in America. I love that verse. I believe it's in Jeremiah. pretty sure it's in Jeremiah. I forgot the address. But when Jeremiah was all discouraged and distraught, God says to him, if you've run with the footmen and they have wearied you, how shall you contend with horses? That speaks for itself. We got to be careful we don't fall into moaning and groaning and sounding mopey and dopey because of the things that are going on. And that's never my intention. I think sometimes maybe people might misunderstand me or misunderstand where I'm coming from, because I get some of that from time to time. If you don't listen to me on a consistent basis, you might think that. But no, not in the least. Not if you listen to me over the course of many years. And over the course of many years, the things I brought forth in different arenas and different facets, according to the ministry that God has entrusted to me, that I try to be faithful with. But again, we need to stand against these things. We need to fight back against these things by standing firm in our faith, come what may, no matter what the cost. That's how we fight back, letting people know what's going on and why it's going on. And the solution at the end of the day is not giving total control of their lives over to the state, but giving total control of their lives over to Jesus Christ. That's what this is all about. It ought to be needless to be said that there is only one who is worthy to have total control over this world and over our lives. And the day is approaching when he will rule from his throne in Jerusalem over the kingdoms of this world with the rod of iron. So I want to begin this second hour with that exhortation coming out of the first hour about how do we fight back? Where is all this going? There's a new book out. I'm going to get back on track with that a little bit. There's a new book out. I have not read the book, but it looks like something I'd be very interested in reading. It's a book by an author named Seamus Bruner. I really don't know anything about him. I've just seen it advertised around. I saw a little bit of a Charlie Kirk interview that he did with Seamus Bruner. But he's got a new book out, and I'm probably going to wind up reading it probably as we approach the holidays. But the name of the book is Controligarchs. It's a great title. Controligarchs. That is exactly, it's a perfect term. I really, really dig that title. That's what caught my eye. It's a perfect term of what these movers and shakers of the world, the Bill Gates and the King Charles and the John Kerrys and all these people, the climate change cabal, it's a perfect term for them. Controligarchs. Now, Seamus Bruner, from what I looked up, he's the director of research at Peter Schweizer's Government Accountability Institute. And I'm familiar with Peter Schweizer. He's written a bunch of expose books on the Clintons and others. Peter Schweizer is a really, really in-depth and credible researcher who's written a bunch of books on the deep state. So if this guy Seamus Bruner is working for Peter Schweizer, he's probably, I'm going to think he's very credible and has integrity. Again, I haven't read his book yet. I'm just like, they say, don't judge a book by its cover, but I'm going to read it because I like what I'm seeing about it. But in the Charlie Kirk interview, he explained that these controligarchs are these individual globalists, like the Bill Gates, like I said a moment ago, the John Kerrys, the globalists, who are quote unquote loyal to the World Economic Forum. They're loyal to the World Economic Forum. They're not loyal to the U.S. Constitution. They're not loyal to America. They're not loyal to Ireland. They're not loyal to Belgium, Belgium or no. These are the movers and the shakers who are seeking to undermine their societies to bring about the vision of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. These individuals are not loyal to the U.S., Seamus Bruner explained in his book. And he says they have other loyalties. Yeah, it's power. And he said that these billionaires seeking control have more in common with the elites of China, something he goes into great detail about in his book. He says, I go into great detail about how they really love China and how they love the Chinese system. I remember doing a broadcast several years ago, might have been 5 years ago already, called The System of the Beast. And it was way before China was really in the news as much as it is now. It's got to be 5 or 6 years ago I did this broadcast, The System of the Beast. Probably have to update it a little bit because it was so long ago. But my premise in that, one of the things I said in that broadcast that I remember is saying that the system of the beast is probably going to be built almost entirely out of Chinese technology. I said that 5 or 6 years ago because I was already investigating back then their surveillance society, the way they were running their economy, the advances they were making in AI. They're far more advanced in AI than America has. We've been trying to play catch up with them. They're far more advanced. I got a whole stack of stuff here about that I might get into depending on if phone calls come in or not, about what's going on with a new outbreak of quote unquote pneumonia in Chinese children. I got a whole bunch of theories about that. But before I digress into that, this book, Control Oligarchs, once I read it, and if I like it, maybe I'll try and get him on the broadcast early next year. But he writes this, which is totally in line with this broadcast today. They want to control every aspect of your life, from what you're eating to what you're seeing to the information you're getting. We talk about it all the time, the censorship and the clamp downs and the cancel culture in society. Anyway, in his book, Control Oligarchs, getting back on that, the only virtue they are interested in is nothing less than your full obeisance to their agenda of compliance and control, period. They've got one goal, total control. So, here we go. There you have it. And it's something that we're going to be continuing to look at and to talk about, to build upon in the weeks and the months ahead, because as I shared in the first hour, our FCC now seems to be in full compatico with the European Union's Digital Services Act. All of these tentacles, all of this convergence, if you will, of tyrannies are coming together. It is the spirit of the age. Now, I said a moment ago, and I'm going to get into this before I go to a break. I said a moment ago that some very interesting things are happening once again as we go into 2024. There are new outbreaks of quote unquote COVID. I really don't want to revisit any of that, but this is what's going on right now. There has been, I don't know if you've heard about this, there has been another very large breakout of a respiratory disease in China. But this time it's hitting kids. It's hitting minors. And when I first heard that, I immediately, my analytical mind began to really kick into gear. Because if you remember, COVID wasn't really affecting minors for those when COVID, when we were going through the pandemic. It was mostly, the demographic was mostly elderly and people with preconditioned disabilities, but it really wasn't affecting minors. So the thought came into my mind because of what I know regarding the Chinese, because they've been working on genetic engineering, as many of us know, for many, many years. COVID-19 was engineered by China. We know that. And my theory is this. They continue to work on it because if anything will rally the world more than anything else is if all of a sudden children and minors start dropping like flies, sorry to use the terminology, because of another respiratory disease. And then it'll be back to no school. It'll be back to clampdowns. It'll be back to lockdowns. I absolutely am convinced. And it's my theory. I don't have the wherewithal to prove any of it, but I just connect the dots. And I've been looking at the Chinese system now for years. I've been reading about what they're doing with CRISPR technology. CRISPR is an acronym for a very long scientific term, but it's basically gene editing. And the Chinese have been doing a lot of things with it. And I would not be surprised one bit if they are now releasing and testing another pandemic, this time really targeting and affecting children. Because like I said, COVID-19 didn't, unless a child was already had preconditions. The stats for COVID, the fatality rate for COVID for minors was negligible, almost none, except again for those that were already previously had problems, physical problems. I want to look into this a little bit more. I want to discuss this a little bit more. I'm going to go to a break right now. But if you want to call in during this song break, 631-725-2069, and add to this conversation, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to continue with the stuff I got on my plate here. And I'm going to play the song. I'm going to play the song again from this local artist because I want to bless him today. It's a song called From the Ashes by Dorian Joseph. And I'll be back. If you want to call in during the song, it's the perfect time to call in. 631-725-2069.
Oh, you help me rise back from the ashes.
From the Ashes, a tune by Dorian Joseph. Man, welcome back. Before I say what I'm going to say, welcome back anyway here on the radio. Tearing down strongholds. You are listening to Open Up the Doors. Integrity in Broadcasting here on Faith FM. WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Apeg. WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. And every time I go to say this brother's name, Dorian Joseph, I almost want to say Dorian Gray. It's like I can't help it. It's like in my head. I think the only, brother, forgive me. I don't think I ever knew somebody named Dorian except from that old novel or movie or whatever that was, Dorian Gray. Anyway, it's one of those things you get stuck in your head, and I almost mess up this poor brother's name. And God bless you, brother. God bless you. I'm getting good reports. People already want to know where to get that tune from. As soon as I know you got a website, and I'll get that information out to them for people who want to get into listen to your music. Now I'll get back on that. What the Chinese have been doing. This is all these things are so connected. This is it's like an onion with all these different levels of skin. You peel off one level of a skin on the onion, you got another level, you got another level, you got another level, and it's like peeling an onion with all of this stuff. But again, it is serious, and I'm hearing more and more serious reports about this respiratory disease that's affecting minors and children that's coming out of China. And I've been saying this for a long time, and I make no bones about it. I believe the Chinese experiment on their own people. They're communists. They don't care about life. They have no respect for life whatsoever. There's, whatever there is, a couple of billion of Chinese or 1.5 billion. I know because of their policies, their population has actually gone down, but it's still quite quite a lot of Chinese people out there in communist China. And the communists, the Marxists, they have no respect for life anyway. Oh, we can just get down the road of history talking about what the communists have done to their own people. Stalin killed 40 to 50 million of his own people. Pol Pot killed millions of his own people. Stalin, Lenin, what's his name there? Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, 1.5 million Cubans. I don't know if it was quite that many, but the point is this. There's been close to 100 in the 20th century under communistic regimes, under godless communism. Over 150 million people were killed. And you often hear the secularists and the socialists, they like to talk about, religion and Christianity has killed millions of people throughout the centuries. Yeah, you know what? Nowhere near what godless secularist communism has killed 150 million people. You could, and I've done it, and I've looked at stats. You could add up all of the deaths during the Crusades, and all of the deaths during the Inquisition, and all of the deaths during even the Reformation, when you had different denominations. You had Calvin burning people at the stake. You had the reformers were at odds with one another. That's a whole nother can of worms. But the point is this: nowhere near 150 million people were killed because of quote-unquote Christianity or religion in general. But secular godless humanism has done that. And there is a oh boy, could I go into a connection here? When godless, when the spirit of the age of godless Marxism and humanism, or communism, I should say, marries itself to the Islamic world order and what Islam teaches, they're going to take this satanic, godless system and they're going to merge it with what they think is God. What they believe is God and is a perversion of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You're going to see billions, and we read about this in Revelation. Because of the wars, because of the sword that's given to the rider on the red horse, and the rider on the green horse. 2/3, 3/4 of the earth's population will be destroyed. And those wars, that sword, it'll be by, if the red horseman was given a great sword, and then the other, I believe it's the rider on the pale horse. I'm confusing it right now. I don't have it in front of me. But then pestilence goes out. All of these things that we're talking about right now with the World Economic Forum, and the UN agenda. These are all prerequisites. These are all the preconditioning. This is all the setting up of the infrastructure system of the beast, so that when that man of sin is revealed in his time, he will take control. There's the word for today. Take control of all of these things that have been already dabbled with and previously instituted and set in place. And part of that is what the Chinese are doing with CRISPR technology. They've been experimenting with gene editing for years. They are trying to create an army of literally terminators between genetics and AI and transhumanism. I don't know how this is all going to necessarily play out on the timeline. But when you read a lot of things, specifically like out of Zechariah 12, 13, and 14, when you read through the book of Revelation, a lot of these things seem like they're coming together. They're just coming together. And the Chinese are in the forefront of this stuff, especially in the area of genetics. I've shared about this in the past with the CRISPR technology, that they want to develop soldiers with enhanced biological capabilities. And it sounds like a science fiction book, but they're actually working on this. And they've been collecting. This is a fact. This isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't hearsay. This is fact. That they're writing about it. They're talking about it. They've been collecting the DNA of people from all the nations of the world, including America and Australia, all the nations of the world. They've been collecting our DNA because what they're working on is they're trying to find and they're trying to create, I shouldn't say find, they won't find one, but they're trying to create a virus that will kill other ethnicities and not affect Asians, and particularly the Chinese. The ultimate genocidal virus. Again, when you read parts of Revelation and the pestilence that goes forth that kills, 2/3 of humanity, whatever the numbers are, you've got to say to yourself, we're at the doorstep. We're at the precipice where all these things can take place. Years ago, Gordon Chang, who's a Chinese American, but he's an expert on China. He wrote in the Gatestone Institute about 2 years ago or so. He said, if Chinese scientists succeed in designing pathogens targeting only foreigners, the next microbe, virus, or germ from China could end non-Chinese societies. Now you think, well, that's impossible. No, really? Read Revelation again. When the pestilence goes forth and large segments, billions of people are killed. When the Bible says, a quarter of the earth was killed because of this pestilence. Well, there's over 8 billion people. What's a quarter of 8 billion? 2 billion? Is that right? I'm terrible in math. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yes. 2 billion people. You wipe out a whole country. You wipe out 2 billion people. There's 330 million Americans. Some of them are Chinese Americans. They would survive. I mean, this sounds like craziness. But the Chinese are actually working on this. And who knows? Only God knows how far they've gotten in this. And one of my pet theories through the last few years of the pandemic has been, do you ever notice why all of these pandemics for the last 10 years have always seemed to start in China? Because this is what they're doing. And I believe with all of my being that they are purposely releasing this to test on their people. Because if they're looking for a pathogen that doesn't affect their people, the only way they're going to be able to find one is to release something where their people aren't affected, but all of a sudden, people who are in China that aren't Chinese are dropping dead. Hello? Okay, I admit I'm on a bunny trail of my own speculation. I admit that. But it's speculation based on what I've been reading and seeing and hearing from things like this article in the Gatestone Institute from several years ago. If Chinese scientists succeed in designing pathogens targeting only foreigners, this next microbe, virus, a germ from China could end non-Chinese societies. This will be communist China's civilization killer. The next pandemic, therefore, could be the one that leaves China as the world's only viable society. And this is how they think. This is demonic. Beijing is determined. It has a determined campaign to collect genetic profiles of foreigners, while preventing the transfer to recipients outside China of the profiles of Chinese. It's another indication that the Chinese military, in violation of its obligations under the Biological Weapons Convention, is building, here's the terminology, they're building ethnic-specific bioweapons. There's a term I was trying to remember, but it's right there in my notes. Biospecific, ethnic-specific bioweapons. How much time do I have here? I got a few minutes left. Phone number is 631-725-2069. 631-725-2069. I'm going to go to another break. If you'd like to call in, now's a perfect time to do it. 631-725-2069. Fusion of heart, mind, and soul. You are listening to Open Up the Doors. Integrity in Broadcasting here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7, 93.3 Napeague, WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Welcome back, everybody. And during the break here, we did get a caller, a listener calling in, and I'm going to go right to the phones because we don't have that much time left. So, hello, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, what's your name again, bro? For our audience.
Another Marco from Truth Social.
Another Marco. Is your name Mark?
It's really Mark.
Mark. Where you calling from?
My name's really Mark, yeah.
Where you calling from?
From Alabama, land of roll tide.
Alabama.
Y'all getting any snow up there yet?
Actually, we had our first flurries 2 days ago. Yesterday? No, Tuesday. Well, Tuesday we had some strong flurries. So yes, old man winter is coming in, blowing in. It was just
we
flurries.
Made a rule about that in Alabama. We don't do snow down here. But for the people having connectivity issues, I've been listening on the radio app. I haven't had any trouble getting disconnected or anything. But I was listening to your talking about especially COVID and the control thing, and I was reading an article the other day about how there's this big brouhaha going on in Congress about kill switches on cars, and they're saying that it's to prevent drunk driving or some sorry excuse that's not really what they're doing. I'm thinking that's how they're going to enforce the next lockdown that's coming, is keep you from going anywhere by turning your car off.
Well, yeah, if they get them in quick enough. I mean, I've heard about that, and they are talking about that. It's not something that they've done yet, and there was a lot of pushback. They might not be able to get away with that because I believe Congress passed some legislation to block that. I'm not 100% sure on the outcome of that. I know there were those in Congress who were saying, no, we're not going to let this happen because obviously it's unconstitutional. Right. But what it does speak to, without a doubt, is
when did the Constitution ever stop them?
Well, I know I've been saying that all day, haven't I? There are. I
remember
go ahead.
A thing from, it's been years ago, that they could actually turn your car off from satellites. All the modern cars, which while they were making a war on older cars, trying to get them all off the road.
Right, I think that was being done through OnStar, which would probably be the same thing. I don't think OnStar is around anymore, but they have other newer versions of it. I could be wrong on that too. I'm not all big on the car technology, but yeah, the bottom line is this: they want to be able, like I've been saying all throughout the last 2 hours, is they want the total takeover of every aspect of our lives. We can't use gas stoves, we can't use gas heaters, we can't even use wood stoves in some places. They're trying to outlaw wood stoves. I mean, that's just a joke. The foods you eat, and it's again, it's incrementalism. This stuff isn't going to happen, boom, all at one time. And they are far more ahead of us in Europe than they are here, because we do have a constitution, and we do have people in Congress, albeit just a few, but who will push back and keep these things at bay. For instance, like the central bank digital currency. I mean, Congress passed something. Again, I'm not sure if it passed, but I know there are those in Congress who are pushing against the centralized bank digital, the CBDC. They're pushing back against it.
Yeah, well, getting it through Congress is one thing. They got to get it through the Senate, and that's not going to happen with the Democrats running that. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, something that would resist it. Exactly. So, but the thing is that there are those who are trying to slow down this runaway train at the very least, and but there is that.
That gets me to another thing that I was thinking about as you were talking was, as I go to pray every day, I pray for, I see all the stuff going on in the world. And are we praying against God's plan by praying to stop with what we see coming?
I've had a lot of people ask that
There are
question.
times in the Bible where biblical people in the Bible prayed and lessened or prevented God from bringing judgment on people, but then, I don't see him putting the brakes on the whole back of the book thing. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, not at all. I agree with that. That's what I was saying earlier I think it was the first, I don't know if it was the first hour or the second hour, but I was basically saying, we can't stop it. It was the top of the second hour. I was saying, we're not going to stop it. And there were times when you raise an interesting point. I'm only down like a couple of minutes, but what I always pray is, God, your will be done. Give me insight and discernment into what you're doing right now and how I should pray. Because remember, God told Jeremiah 3 times to stop praying for Israel. He said, look at Jeremiah 15, 1 through 4. Jeremiah, it's set in stone. I'm judging these people for what Manasseh did. They're gonna, my 4 judgments are going to come against them. And even if Samuel and Job were to pray, and he says the same thing in Ezekiel 14:12. But he told Jeremiah 3 times, don't pray for these people. That doesn't sit well with our modern ears. But Jeremiah specifically was told, stop interceding for them. I've made up my mind. I'm paraphrasing it, but you can look it up there in Jeremiah. It's there. Trust me. So, I leave it with God. Help me to preach the gospel. Help me to be a light. Help me to explain, like I do on this broadcast, the things that you're doing in this world. And let your will be done, because, God's will be done, and sometimes it's done in ways that befuddle us, like the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. That was totally within the game plan of God. What the people meant for evil, God meant for good. So, can we stop maybe certain incidental things from happening? Of course, I believe in secession. And maybe we could pray for certain legislation to fail and certain things to fail and slow things down here and there. But in the macro, these things are going to happen. So even more than, and don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying we shouldn't pray for proper policies and stuff like that. We should. But more than that, we need to pray that God would change the hearts of people. Because the bottom line is this: we're not going to legislate. We're not going to legislate holiness. We're not going to legislate. In fact, a very famous quote from Martin Luther King. He said, "You cannot legislate morality, but you can mitigate behavior." So that's the best we're going to do through policies and legislation, is mitigate behavior. We could slow down the runaway train on abortion, but people will still find ways to get around it. We need to pray their hearts will be changed. That's what's going to happen. What needs to happen?
I've started praying for the leaders of Israel to have wisdom, because they're trying to get, Americans are, Blinken's over there right now trying to talk them into ending the war and extending the ceasefire to God knows when. But
yep.
I just don't want to see them get talked into that.
Yeah, we've been placing a lot of pressure behind the scenes on Israel. I shared about that. I think it was I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I did a broadcast called "The Wrong Side of History," and what the administration is portraying publicly is completely different than what they're portraying privately behind the scenes, and that's something to keep an eye on for sure. But Marco, I want to thank you for calling in. I'm down to my last minute, and I'm going to have to wrap up.
All right.
Wrap
Nice
this up.
talking to you, Andy.
God bless you, bro. God bless you. I'll see you on Truth Social. Get people to join the group.
All right. All right.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for calling in. Thanks for listening.
All right.
God bless. God bless. All righty. And I am down to just a couple of seconds here. So there's a lot going on, a lot we're going to keep our eyes on, because that is the purpose of this broadcast. That is what the Lord has placed in my hands regarding this broadcast, regarding the things that I bring forth on a week-to-week basis. But I am out of time for today's broadcast, and I'll be back next week. In the meantime, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave and be strong, and let all that you do, beloved, be done in love. I gotta go, but keep it right here on Faith FM.